Coming up on Network Africa. Security officer in Guinea sentenced to 10 years in prison for murder of a 19-year-old protester. Chadian President Mohamed Idris Deby pardons 259 jailed protesters for sundry offenses. And United States Vice President Kamala Harris pledges millions to fight jihadists in Africa. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers here in Lagos. Today we begin in Guinea, where a security officer has been sentenced to 10 years in prison for the murder of a 19-year-old. Moriba Kamara shot dead Tieno Mamadou Diallo during opposition coalition protests last June. The prosecution had sought a longer sentence of 25 years in jail for Kamara, and the victim's brother reportedly said the court's lesser sentence of 10 years was too light for such a crime. President of Chad, Mohamed Idris Deby, has pardoned 259 people out of the 262 jailed in December during a deadly confrontation between police and protesters in the capital, N'Djamena. They had been convicted for offenses including unauthorized assembly, destruction of property, arson, violence, and assault during the clashes in which 73 people died. It comes days after 380 rebels sentenced to life for the death of former ruler Idris Deby. The current president's father were also pardoned in an apparent peace gesture. The late Idris Deby died during an operation against rebels in 2021. He had ruled the country for 30 years. United States is promising to continue a push for all bilateral creditors to provide meaningful debt reduction for countries that need it, including Ghana. The United States Vice President Kamala Harris, who is currently on a West African tour, gave this assurance. Ms. Harris spoke at a joint news conference with Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo. During the news conference, Ms. Harris also announced a $100 million package to support conflict prevention. She is in Ghana as she begins a week-long trip to Africa, part of Washington's drive to counter growing Chinese and Russian influence on the continent. Meanwhile, President of Chad, Mohamed Idris Deby, has pardoned 259 people out of the 262 jailed in December during deadly confrontations between police and protesters in the capital. They had been convicted for various offenses. Well, ever since Said last month ordered urgent measures against sub-Saharan migrants over a purported criminal plot to change the North African countries' demographic, the North African countries that make up West countries have repatriated hundreds of their fearful nationals. Tunisia's already disadvantaged black minority has also been hit by this development. 26-year-old Nebras Magna, a black Tunisian and college graduate working as a waitress, said the speech incited physical and verbal violence with openly racist actions taken without fear of reprisal. Sadia Mosbach, who leads the anti-racism campaign group, pointed to 5 or 6 attacks on black Tunisians in recent weeks. Black Tunisians make up about 10 to 15% of the country's 12 million people, many with centuries-old roots in Tunisia from ancestors who arrived during the slave trade.
The support given by the EU to the Libyan Coast Guard in terms of pullbacks, pushbacks, interceptions, lead to violations of certain human rights. Non-refoulement, for example, you can't push people back to areas that are unsafe. And the Libyan waters are unsafe for embarkation of migrants, quite clearly. Our focus was on the victims and the measures that needed to be taken in relation to the victims. So taking that line in the context of violations, in the context of the state building project in Libya, which is what it is, it's the collapse of the state of Libya that has led to these violations. And therefore, for the international community, the fact-finding mission has laid out bare facts and bare findings.
We have found instances of enslavement of persons who have been traded to outside entities to perform various services, but also sexual slavery of women in and around detention centers. The findings in respect of both are new for the FFM and represents, I think, a very significant set of violations which we had not been able to establish in our previous reporting cycles.
Back to that story on the U.S. promise to African countries. The United States is promising to continue a push for all bilateral creditors to provide meaningful debt reduction for countries that need it, and this includes Ghana. The United States Vice President Kamala Harris, who is currently on a West African tour, gave this assurance. She spoke at a joint news conference with Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo. During the news conference, Ms. Harris also announced a $100 million package for support for conflict prevention.
To help address the threats of violent extremism and instability, today I am pleased to announce $100 million in support of Benin, Ghana, Guinea, Cote d'Ivoire, and Togo. Last week, President Joe Biden announced a strategic plan for coastal West Africa as part of the United States strategy to prevent conflict and promote stability. Today, funding and the announcement that I've just made will help implement that plan and will address security, governance, and development issues in the region. That the relationship between the United States and this continent and African leaders is an important one. There's a historical basis for the relationship, not to mention as we look forward, as all governments should, and recognize the unachieved, as of yet, opportunities that exist going forward.
Our relationship with America is a relationship that has been forged over several decades, right from the time of independence up till now. I'm pleased to state that Vice President Harris pledged America's support for this transformative agenda. It is this transformation that will give us best opportunity to derive maximum benefit from our abundant natural resources, enable us create a firmer foundation for meaningful long-term economic and commercial relations with the United States of America.
Humza Yousaf has been elected to succeed Nicola Sturgeon as SNP leader and Scotland's First Minister. The Health Secretary was endorsed by far more SMPs and MPs than his two rivals. When the 37-year-old is confirmed as Scotland's First Minister, he will make history as the first ethnic minority leader of a developed government and the first Muslim to lead a major UK party. His father is originally from Pakistan and emigrated to Scotland with his family in the 1960s, while his mother was born into a South Asian family in Kenya. Mr. Yousaf has often spoken about racist abuse he has faced.
My immediate priority will be to continue to protect every Scot as far as we possibly can from the harm inflicted by the cost of living crisis, to recover and reform our NHS and other vital public services, to support our well-being economy, to improve the life chances of people right across this country. I will move quickly to develop plans to extend childcare, to improve rural housing, support small businesses and boost innovation across the party and across the country as I build that. And for those of us in this room and watching who do believe in independence, we will only win by making that case on the doorsteps. And my solemn promise and commitment to you is that I will kickstart our grassroots, our civic-led movement, and ensure our drive for independence is in fifth gear. The people of Scotland need independence now more than ever before, and we will be the generation that delivers independence for Scotland. As Mohammed Yusuf worked in the Singer sewing machine factory in Clydebank, as Rahmat Ali Bhutta stamped tickets on the Glasgow Corporation buses, they could not have imagined, as I say in their wildest dreams, that 2 generations later, that their grandson would one day be on the cusp of being Scotland's First Minister. We should all take pride in the fact that today we have sent a clear message that your colour of skin, or indeed your faith, is not a barrier to leading the country that we all call home. From the Punjab to our Parliament, this is a journey over generations that reminds us we should be celebrating and always celebrate the migrants who contribute so much to our country. Next First Minister tomorrow. And just as I will lead the SNP in the interests.
Elsewhere, the United Nations is calling for more collaboration to promote women empowerment here in Nigeria. The UN Resident Coordinator, Matthias Schmal, made this call during his final wrap-up ceremony of a project on strengthening the capacity of small businesses in Abuja. The UN, in partnership with the European Union, empowered about 170 small businesses for the production of personal protective equipment and other healthcare-related products.
Today, as we celebrate the achievement of 170 MSMEs and manufacturers of healthcare personal protective equipment, selected, as I've mentioned, across the 6 geopolitical zones of Nigeria, it is really very noteworthy that more than 50% are run by women and young people. So that's significantly more than the originally planned target of 30% women and 20% young people. And yes, I think that does deserve another round of applause. I very much commend these collaborations and request all of us, not just within the UN, to consider synergies in other sectors that promote women empowerment, local industries, and that create employment opportunities in a country where, as we all know, the rate of unemployment is very high.
Welcome back. A meeting of the European Gas Conference in Vienna was met with protests on Monday as Zimbabwean climate activists accused participants of being war and inflation profiteers. Among the more than 250 attendees are the senior vice president of Norway-based international energy company Equinor, the vice president LNG trading of French energy company Total, as well as representatives from Osaka Gas, Swedish energy supplier Vattenfall, and Germany's RWE. According to the European Gas Conference, the meeting will address the long-term role of natural gas in Europe and its position in the transition to help reach net zero targets. Key themes include creating long-term flexibility after the breakdown of European-Russia relations.
Speaking from our own experiences in Africa, we have a colonial history with fossil companies who have continuously plundered African resources and extracted massive, obscene profits. And well, Africa is left with redundant lands, water polluted, displaced from our ancestral lands. So we're here to resist this agenda. We all know that fossil production has caused the global climate crisis, and Africa sits at the front lines of the climate crisis. And this agenda to increase gas production in Africa is not to benefit Africa energy poverty or Africa's developmental issues, but it is actually to expatriate resources. And also, in addition to that, we all know that the climate crisis as it is, Africa has not contributed much to the climate crisis, and yet we are suffering the most from the climate crisis. So we are resisting this colonial, extractive, profit-making agenda.
We are facing floods, we are facing storms. This is all a result of the climate emergency, and the climate crisis is not waiting for us. So we're here to say no. We're here to say we need renewable energy now. We're here to say once again that we refuse to be Europe's gas station, and we refuse to be perpetuated by regimes that only give a vulnerability, that do not improve socio-economic livelihoods. We're here to stand and be the voices for Africa, because Africa does not want gas. We want renewable energy, we want a sustainable future.
One of 8 cheetahs flown to India from Namibia in September last year has died. Namibia's Environment Ministry spokesman Romeo Muyunda said the cheetah, aged 5, died of kidney failure. He adds that the cheetah, named Sasha, had been under medical care for the past 3 months. The female cheetah was not put into the wild but had been in quarantine for observation and treatment. According to Mr. Muyunda, the other cheetahs are doing very well. Currently, 4 of them are out in the wild, engaged in hunting and being monitored. The 8 cheetahs, 5 females and 3 males, were flown from Namibia to India's Kuno National Park to reintroduce their population after 70 years of extinction. They were relocated as part of Project Cheetah, the world's first intercontinental large wild carnivore translocation project. The spokesman for the UN Secretary-General, Stefan Dujarric, has been speaking about the cholera outbreak in the North Kivu province in the Democratic Republic of Congo. He was speaking at a press conference in New York. Mr. Dujarric said the areas of Goma, Karasimbi, Masisi, and Nyiragongo were particularly impacted by this outbreak.
Province. Turning to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, our humanitarian colleagues there are telling us there's a cholera outbreak now in North Kivu province. They say areas of Goma, Karisimbi, Masasi, and Nyiragongo are particularly impacted by this outbreak. Health authorities have registered 1,800 confirmed and suspected cases between the 13th and 19th of March. That's compared to 1,000 cases the previous week. In total, 6,200 cases of cholera have been registered between beginning of the year and last week. The affected areas have host over 1 million internally displaced people with precarious living conditions, many in displacement sites. We're of course concerned that people's limited access to fresh water and inadequate hygiene conditions is facilitating the spread of this disease. We, along with our partners, continue to support cholera treatment centers. However, resources are limited and the situation may deteriorate further without additional funding to scale up the response.
Let's get more on her Africa tour. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris took time to visit a music studio in Accra, Ghana during her tour of the continent. She was joined by actors Idris Elba and Cheryl Lee Ralph. While visiting Vibrate Studio, Ms. Harris highlighted the universal language involved in the creation of music from young African artists. She was in Accra at the start of a week-long three-nation African tour, the latest in a series of visits by senior U.S. officials as Washington seeks to strengthen ties on the continent.
I think it's a great significant signal for a VP to come to Ghana, to come to Africa, and be that interfacing, you know, to show the rest of the world that actually it's a fantastic place to sort of look at in terms of partnership and investment. I was invited to the African Leadership Summit at the last minute to come along and add some razzmatazz, I guess. But what happened was that I found myself in the middle of, you know, a lot of conversations around the creative arts industry, what they call the orange economy, which is a very big economy that has a lot of growth potential in Africa, and how important it is to the narrative shift of Africa, not just as telling stories in films, but just changing the way people see Africa and understand it.
The recipients of this year's Polar Music Prize, widely regarded as industry's equivalent of the Nobel Prize, have just been announced. The founder of Island Records, Chris Blackwell, who is credited with bringing Bob Marley to a global audience, has been awarded. The other winners are the Beninois singer Angelique Kidjo and the Estonian composer Arvo Art, who last year regained the title of the most performed living composer. The award celebrates the 3 laureates for their achievements in music. It's the 3rd time in history of the award that the 3 laureates have won. Sir Paul McCartney, Bob Dylan, and Dizzy Gillespie have all won in the past. The award was created by ABBA's manager, Stig Anderson. The Grannies Soccer World Cup is the first of its kind, hosted by a South African football club which was formed in 2007 to try to improve the health of the local grannies. The news of its success is spread. The club has inspired the birth of other granny soccer teams and leagues across the region. Take a look.
Sporting red jerseys and matching cleats, the Grannies of South Africa's Vakekula soccer team jump for joy as one of their own scores a deciding goal against a team visiting from the United States. An adoring crowd of hundreds erupts with applause. It's the first day of the Grannies International Football Tournament in Limpopo province, and this team, like the others, is made up of women aged 55 and above. Vakekula means grandmother in the Songa language spoken in South Africa. Flora Baloy, 66, started playing in 2017 after suffering from severe arthritis.
At this age, at my age, I think if I was not in this sport, I should have been confined in a wheelchair. I strike physical and inside me, so a lot of toxins come out of me when I am striking.
Now she says she no longer needs medication as the exercise keeps her physically and mentally fit. When not practicing with the team, she watches soccer on television with her husband and spends time with her 5 grandsons.
Lord Jesus, hello.
The 4-day tournament is seeing 32 teams compete, including 9 from South Africa and 23 from abroad.
We love it. It means so much to us. It's a community, makes us healthy, and we know that they want that same thing. So we are so excited to be here to meet all the people in Africa.
Wearing blue track suits and waving their national flag, the ladies of Vakekula jog into the stadium to cheers ahead of their match against Team USA. Teams from other countries carrying flags of their own aren't far behind. Those who travel the farthest, however, are the teams from France and the United States.
How about that? Having grannies play, very, very inspirational. Well, that's it on the program today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joker Rogers.